Hi folks, and welcome to another edition of Zog Science. Today we're going to be talking about the circulatory system, some different adaptations that different organisms have, and how that kind of relates to our topic of energy. So the resources that animal cells require, such as nutrients and oxygen, enter the cytoplasm by crossing the cell membrane. And in unicellular organisms, exchange occurs directly with the environment. Because they're so small, they can diffuse that directly from the outside inside. However, multicellular organisms and animals are too large for that so therefore they need to have some sort of specialized structure in order to help them to be able to transport those materials around their bodies. So the circulatory system is that system that links exchange surfaces with the actual cells throughout the body. So in the last video, we talked about the digestive system, right, and how that breaks down nutrients and turns them into the monomers, and then those monomers are transported into the bloodstream. Well, now the circulatory system, which is connected to the bloodstream, is going to be able to transport those nutrients throughout the body, so that way they can get to all of your various cells. So the reason why we need to have a circulatory system is that diffusion can occur between cells that are right next to each other. You can move small molecules. However, it is only efficient for small distances, and so you need to be able to get the nutrients to each of those cells so that diffusion can take place efficiently. In small animals, if you have a central gastrovascular cavity, then that can actually effectively distribute all the substances and diffusion can occur easily. So, for example, in these flatworms, the gastrovascular cavity is right down the middle of the organism, and it can very easily then diffuse those materials throughout the body. However, animals with a more complex body plan need to have a circulatory system in order to be able to accomplish this. So a circulatory system has some sort of fluid, it has a set of interconnecting vessels, and it has some sort of muscular pump, which is called a heart. And the heart is what actually powers the circulation of the fluids by using energy. So it takes energy in order to be able to move the fluid around, so that way then all the cells have energy. Circulatory systems are either open or closed. An open circulatory system is one where the fluid that the system circulates actually kind of bathes and surrounds all the organs directly, and there's no specific vessels that the fluid flows through. And in this case, in an open circulatory system, that fluid is called hemolymph, and it is also the fluid that bathes all of the body cells. So here's an example of an open circulatory system, which is something that a grasshopper or insects have. You have a heart that pumps the liquid into the body cavity. It then bathes all of the organs, and then it also pulls back in and continues the circulation of that hemolymph. In a closed circulatory system, you have a blood, which is confined in vessels and is distinct from the interstitial, or the fluid that actually surrounds all of these cells. These systems are found in annelids, which are roundworms, things like earthworms, cephalopods, and all vertebrates. And you're going to have one or more hearts that actually pump blood through the vessels, and then chemical exchange of the blood. So diffusion occurs between the blood and the interstitial fluid, and then between the interstitial fluid and the body cells. So diffusion is occurring over short distances, but the blood doesn't actually mix with the interstitial fluid itself. So here's our earthworm. You can see we've got a heart that is going to push the blood to small branching vessels that surround each of the organs. That allows diffusion to take place, and then the blood is returned back to the heart, but the blood never leaves its actual the blood vessels. So humans and other vertebrates have a closed circulatory system that is specifically called the cardiovascular system. The three main types of blood vessels are arteries, veins, and capillaries, and blood flow is one way in all of these vessels, and we're going to take a look at this system in more detail. So arteries branch into arterioles, which are small arteries essentially, and then they carry blood away from the heart to the capillaries. And it's these capillaries that are going to affect the exchange of nutrients and gases and waste between the blood and the organs that it is taking that to, or taking the waste away from. And the capillaries are very small, especially in comparison with arteries. Sometimes they may only be like 1 or 2 cells across. And then you have venules, which are your small veins that converge into which are your small veins that then turn into veins, and they return blood back to the heart. Arteries and veins are distinguished by the direction of blood flow, not by how much oxygen they have. So arteries carry blood away from the heart, while veins carry blood to the heart. And vertebrate hearts contain 2 or more chambers. Blood enters through the atria and is pumped out by the ventricles. And there's 2 different ways that you can have this type of circulation in vertebrates. You can either have single circulation, which is found in fish. They have a 2-chambered heart where the circulation is in a single direction. So here's your 2-chamber heart. You have the atria and the ventricle. The ventricle squeezes. It pushes that blood into the gill capillaries. The gill capillaries then go into the body capillaries. So it's pushing the blood now to the rest of the body. And then that blood returns via veins back into the atria or to the heart. In a double circulatory system, which is what amphibians, reptiles, and mammals have, you have different sides of the heart that pump oxygen-poor and oxygen-rich blood. And so because of that, you're able to have a larger amount of blood that you can pump, and also you have increased blood pressure. And it also simplifies the coordination of the pumping cycle. So here's a double circulatory system example for amphibians. Amphibians actually only have a single ventricle, so there's actually some mixing of the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. But it's a similar plan. The heart pumps blood to the lungs. The lungs then come back into the heart. The blood is then pumped to the body, and then it returns back to the heart. In a mammal's system, we actually have a separation of the 2 ventricles, which means that the deoxygenated blood is separate from the oxygenated blood. And why this is important is that mammals are warm-blooded animals, and so because of that, they need to have more oxygenated blood. You need to have more efficient blood because you've got to create more energy in order to maintain that internal body temperature. So what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about how the heart actually works and how it works in a double circulatory system. So because mammals, again, are warm-blooded animals, you have to be creating heat. You have to have oxygen continuously, and the cardiovascular system promotes that. So blood flow begins in the right ventricle, pumping blood to the lungs via the pulmonary arteries. So it's taking blood to the arteries. The blood loads oxygen and unloads carbon dioxide in the capillary beds of the lungs. We'll talk about that process in the next video. Then you have oxygen-rich blood from the lungs entering the heart at the left atria via the pulmonary veins because it's returning back to the heart, and then it's pumped through the aorta to the body tissues by the left ventricle. The aorta also provides blood to the heart itself, so the heart is a muscle. It's going to need blood. Again, we're going to have gas exchange, so O2 and CO2 are going to be exchanged in the capillary beds throughout the body, and then blood returns to the heart through the veins, right, the superior and the inferior vena cavas, and then they flow into the right atria.
In mammals, blood pumped by the right side of the heart passes through the lungs and enters the left side of the heart. This is the pulmonary circuit. Blood pumped by the left side of the heart is distributed to the other body organs and returns to the right side of the heart. This is the systemic circuit. This pattern, called double circulation, ensures vigorous blood flow to the organs because the heart pumps the blood a second time after it returns from the lungs.
So here's just a diagram showing all that. It is not necessary that you have all of the specific names memorized, but you should understand and know the general flow of blood through mammals' body and through your body. So let's going to take a little bit closer look at the heart itself and figure out how it works. The heart contracts and relaxes in a rhythmic cycle, and when the heart contracts, it pumps blood, and when it relaxes, its chamber is filled with blood. So it contracts, it pumps it relaxes, it fills it back up, and this continuous cycle is what keeps the blood moving. So just a closer look at the heart. You've got the right and left ventricles, and then you have the left and right atria. You'll notice that those are opposite on your screen. That's because they are from the perspective of the animal or from the human. So The left atria would be over here on your left side, and the right atria is over here, or is on the right, left and right. So it's just backwards because of the direction that we're looking at it. So we can see following the arrows that blood is coming into the right atria. It's then pushed into the right ventricle. From the right ventricle, it goes to the pulmonary arteries, which takes it to the lungs. It then returns back to the left ventricle, the left atria, which then pumps it into the left ventricle, and from there it goes into the aorta and to the rest of your body. The contraction phase of the cardiac cycle is called systole, and the relaxation phase is called diastole. If you've ever done your blood pressure and you've seen the systolic and the diastolic pressures, that's what this is referring to. So the systole is when you're contracting, that's the pressure in your veins when it contracts. Your diastolic pressure, that is when it is relaxed. So again, just kind of going through the process here. During the relaxation phase, the arterioles are open and the ventricles are open. Blood is going to be moving into the heart. The atria will then relax. The atria will then contract, and the ventricles will again relax, and you'll get even more blood into the ventricles. The ventricles will then contract, and they will force the blood out. And then the atria will be relaxed, so they will be bringing blood in, and this process will repeat itself. The lub-dub sound of the heartbeat is caused by the recoil of the blood against the AV valves, which are the valves that are between the different chambers of the heart. And then the dub is them coming up against the semilunar valves, which are the ones between the heart and the rest of the body. You don't need to know specifically which valves those are. I just think it's an interesting fact. The backflow of blood through a defective valve. So if your valves are not functioning properly, is what causes a heart murmur, and so physicians can listen for those murmurs and hear it if the lub-dub is not very distinct and clear. Some cardiac muscle cells are autorhythmic, which means that they contract without any signal from the nervous system. So you have a sinoatrial node or pacemaker, which sets the rate and timing at which all the other cardiac muscle cells contract. The SA node produces electrical impulses that spread rapidly through the heart and can be recorded on an EKG or electrocardiogram. The K comes from the German spelling of the word. So the way that this works is that the SA node, which is also called the pacemaker, will fire. That will then cause the first bump in the EKG. It will then set off the AV node. It is delayed slightly. The AV node will then fire, which will cause the ventricles to fire, which will then cause the ventricles to react. And that is basically how the process occurs. You get one, and then you get the next. So again, the atria are the ones that fire first, and then the ventricles are the ones that fire after that. And again, the process just kind of repeats. There are lots of different things that can affect the pacemaker. So, for example, movements, right, can cause the pacemaker to function more quickly. Also, hormones and temperature can influence the pacemaker. Things like epinephrine, right, which is adrenaline, can impact the how much the heart is contracting. All right, that's all I've got for you today. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.